Welcome to this video on ego state contamination, one of a series of videos on transactional analysis concepts. When viewing this video, it is useful to understand the first order structural model and the second order structural model. If you are not familiar with these elements of transactional analysis, please view our videos on them. Ego state contamination happens when we confuse the thoughts, feelings, and experience of our parent and/or child ego states with the thoughts, feelings, and experience of our adult ego state. This confusion results in our adult ego state being contaminated. Rather than dealing with people and events in the here and now in a rational, adult way, we react in a way that is distorted by unwelcome aspects of our parent ego state, our child ego state, or both. Parent contamination occurs when we treat the rules and commands learned from parent figures not as the mere taught beliefs they are, but as universal facts that cannot be challenged. In effect, they limit and define our view of the world we experience. In transactional analysis, these contaminated beliefs are called prejudice, and the thinking behind them, justification. We get into the habit of thinking in certain ways to justify our prejudices. Specifically, when we are in our adult ego state, and parent contamination has occurred, we filter the information we receive about the nature of the world around us, excluding that which contradicts our prejudice and accepting that which reinforces it. In this way, we can enter cycles of negative thinking that can be difficult to escape. Parent contamination is often signalled by statements about the nature of reality and how it affects us that are in fact comments on our own experience, but which use the word you in place of the word I. For an example of this, we can consider Claire, a company manager, who is talking to a colleague. She says, "You've got to be careful with the bosses. They'll do anything they can to blame you." The universal nature of this statement, she is condemning all bosses, in all cases, rather than treating them as individuals who are each likely to respond to her differently according to their relationship with her. And the use of the word you while discussing her own life experience indicates that this is parent contamination. The rational, unbiased view of the world she should have when in her adult ego state is clearly being distorted. It is probable that Claire introjected this view, or swallowed it whole, from one or more parent figures who themselves believed they were not displaying prejudice but stating a fact. More on the subject of introjects may be found in our video on the second order structural model. As young children, to cope with the big scary world we find ourselves in, we often develop exaggerated fantasies about our place in that world and about ourselves. If, instead of our view of existence evolving as we grow up, these fantasies persist, then the result is child contamination of our adult ego state. This usually involves extreme, flawed statements about ourselves and our ability to deal with reality using the word I that we take as fact rather than the erroneous beliefs they are. These beliefs are known in transactional analysis as delusions. When experiencing child contamination, we filter the information we receive about ourselves from the world, excluding that which contradicts our contaminated beliefs and accepting that which reinforces them. In this way, the rational, grown-up operation of our adult ego state in the here and now is compromised. This process is known as rationalization. When we rationalize, child contamination can be sustained indefinitely unless appropriate therapeutic work takes place. When we form the exaggerated views involved in child contamination, we do not yet have the adult thought processes needed to deal rationally with the world in the here and now, meaning that our childhood view of the world is by its very nature both distorted and exaggerated. This, and the intense and long-standing nature of the feelings involved, means that child contamination can be especially difficult to deal with. This is accentuated by the fact that when we experience child contamination as adults, we often replay the moments from our childhood in which these contaminated beliefs were formed, and we do so without being aware of it. Given this, gently aiding awareness of possible child contamination with the client can be an important first step in helping them deal with it. For an example of child contamination, we can return to Claire, the company manager, and her conversation with a colleague regarding their superiors. As the conversation continues, Claire gets more and more nervous about her forthcoming performance review, saying, It's always the same. I can't deal with bosses, and I never can. This is clearly not a purely adult appraisal of the situation. In Claire's past, there are more than a few examples of her dealing effectively with superiors. However, with her adult ego state contaminated by her child, Claire does not see this as she is unconsciously filtering out the information. She only recalls occasions when interactions with superiors have gone badly, reinforcing her delusion, and genuinely thinks she is making an adult judgment of how her superiors will treat her in a performance review. The treatment Claire imagines she will receive at the hands of her superiors is so scary to her because of the deep-seated nature of child contamination. Like all children, Claire is likely to have perceived the information received from the world, and her parent figures especially, as exaggerated and extremely threatening. Given this, its long-term effect on her interaction with the world is similarly intense. It may be that as a small child, Claire had a number of frightening experiences with parent figures in authority over her. This happened often enough for Claire to form the unconscious belief, the delusion, that she will never be able to stand up to intimidating authority figures. This is so difficult for her to deal with because when she experiences this child contamination, she is likely to be directly replaying the childhood experiences that caused it to form. As she faces these menacing authority figures, she is effectively doing so as a small child. Both parent contamination and child contamination can exist at the same time. This is known as double contamination. Also known as a script belief, double contamination is made up of complementary contaminations. Each reinforces the other. The resulting power and intensity makes script beliefs not only very difficult to deal with, but also a key part of the various, often harmful, mental processes and techniques we develop to navigate the world, such as the life script, personality adaptations, rackets, and games. For more information on these other parts of transactional analysis, please see our videos on them. For an example of double contamination, we can, once again, consider Claire. Her previously mentioned parent contamination, you've got to be careful with the bosses, they'll do anything they can to blame you, and child contamination, it's always the same, I can't deal with bosses, I never can, are clearly complementary. They involve the threat she perceives from intimidating authority figures, and her ingrained reaction to that threat respectively. This results in a script belief that Claire finds deeply problematic as she moves through her life, something that can be seen in an analysis of her life script and personality adaptations, and the rackets and games she employs. The first order structural model introjects as part of the second order structural model, and the other transactional analysis concepts mentioned are dealt with in other videos. Please visit our channel for more, and subscribe if you'd like to be notified when new videos are uploaded.